Hello, my name's Claire Darwin and I'm the Principal Educational and Child Psychologist here in Suffolk, and I'm going to outline the analysis of additional needs consultation process in this presentation today. Thank you. First of all, I'll talk through an outline of the ANT, and then I'll move on to look at some feedback and impact of working in this way, and finally looking at sort of where we want to take the ANT next. So in summary, the ANT is an online consultation framework that's used by educational psychologists with someone from education setting. It can be used from nursery right through to post-16. So it's a consultation that will basically guide and support next steps in terms of supporting young people with additional needs. It facilitates a whole rich picture, so you're looking at the young person's strengths and difficulties from a range of perspectives, and the conversation that then takes place with the psychologist and then someone or a couple of people from the education setting, you basically end up with an agreed sort of next steps action plan to support that young person in their setting. It's absolutely underpinned by a framework of inclusive, person-centred, strength-based psychology, solution-oriented psychology, and it has been co-produced over years. In fact, I will share that on the next slide. It's had a bit of a history, and it's been developed and sort of updated over 10 years. And we're using the ANT across all sorts of different educational settings, and it's accessible to all staff who want to have a conversation with a psychologist based on the information that's collated on this online form. So this slide shows the history. So we've had 3 versions of the ANT. We've moved the consultation framework from paper-based face-to-face consultation with the psychologist, and actually it started in the Youth Justice Service where the consultations took place, and actually over the years we decided to move the ANT into education settings. It was really important that we were having conversations around children at sort of an early intervention stage. So we moved the ANT into education settings in around 2016 and moved the paper-based form onto Excel and SharePoint. And then as we've evolved over time and used the ANT with more and more education setting staff, we've actually moved on to a version 3, which is a fully fledged off of SharePoint onto the cloud. And that's the version that I'm going to share now. One way of explaining the ANT process is to consider the before the consultation, sort of during the whole consultation process and preparing for it, and then after. So before the consultation takes place, you're basically gathering really rich information, and it allows a psychologist to really look at that information on the form and consider their formulation or their hypothesis for what's happening in this situation for the child and young person and family and education setting perspective. And then you have your consultation, and after the consultation you will have a clear plan of action. You'll have it will be written down, so it will be a report, and people leave the consultation feeling empowered and their views have been valued. And part of the conversation really is an upskilling around different strategies, a conversation around strategies. And so that's sort of how the consultation is finished, really, in the sense that everything's agreed. The psychologist will sort of click submit and submit the report, and that goes straight to the setting. ANT Online adheres to all of the safety measures required through the data protection regulations, and it's basically a comprehensive analysis and psychological support process that's around agreeing inclusive strategies to support the inclusion of children and young people. It's fast in the sense that it's speed without compromise, so it's a consultation process that's really in depth, using that analysis of the strengths and areas of need, and you end up with your action plan. We have undertaken hundreds of ANTs in our local authority, and we have looked at data that comes back, and we know that it prevents situations escalating, supports inclusion, and helps prevent placement breakdown. You do end up with a report, and basically that means you can monitor progress and review, and it's very reassuring and empowering for people who are part of that process. So in summary, you log on to AANT Online, you complete the form. This is for education setting staff, and you get the views from family and other staff within the setting. All goes onto that form. The psychologists will analyse the information, sort of develop their formulation, and then you have your consultation with an educational psychologist, and you come away with a report, a written report. So you basically, it's a PDF that is automatically uploaded onto the site, and then you've got your action plan. And that's it, that's the process in a nutshell. This is showing a basic summary of what's on the form in terms of the focus areas. So the form collects information that is on all those areas showing on the slide. It enables you to sort of ask questions and have a discussion with the family. They're very outcome focused, so the whole framework of the AANT is a solution oriented sort of psychological framework, so all the questions are sort of outcome focused, and then you can obviously review progress over a certain amount of time, whether you think that time is right, and you can review the strategies, the recommended strategies that you've put in place in the educational setting. Oh, this slide is reminding me to mention the fact that there is a separate form for early years. So when you enter the child's date of birth into the AANT Online form, the form knows whether to give you the questions that are for early years or for older children and young people. And that's just showing you a sort of area and the type of sort of information that we obtain. So over the years, we've moved this model into a digital teleconsultation process. We were doing this irrespective of COVID. So as I sort of shared the journey of the AANT from being a paper-based form and face-to-face consultation, and then now we're on version 3, it's digital teleconsultation, and we found that to be a really effective way of sort of undertaking the consultations. The outcomes are the same for children and young people, irrespective of whether the psychologist has sort of driven to the school to undertake the consultation or had that telephone or teleconsultation. So we really see the AANT educational psychology consultation process fits into a graduated response to SEND. So it's part of that assess, plan, do, review cycle. And there I've just popped some feedback from settings to really show the value that people have found. It's just a summary there. But I think it was having the fresh pair of eyes and that conversation with a psychologist that really sort of facilitated so many suggestions to go and try. And it's the opportunity for the psychologist and the education setting to kind of listen to each other and agree those actions together, which is very powerful. I'm going to share with you some of the impact and outcome measures that we've found when using the AANT on the next couple of slides. What we found is a sort of like a ripple effect, really. So the consultation takes place with education setting and educational psychologist. However, the impact can be seen. It can be seen at a local authority level, at a child and young person and family level, and within the setting, the staff and sort of the context, really. So, I mean, I've put a summary there that you can sort of read through. I think the idea really that this slide is showing is that the benefits, like I say, as a ripple effect. So actually sometimes, even though the consultation is about one child, we've often had feedback saying, the things that we talked about in that consultation will be very useful for, and then either other children in the same class or different classes. We notice that through the conversation, it's a very solution focused conversation, and we can see and we get feedback that perspectives change during that conversation, and sometimes the conversations are kind of take a different angle perhaps than what the education setting staff originally thought they were going to have a conversation about, and that really shows in the feedback that we get. It's very collaborative, and it really helps to give people direction. It's very time efficient. And obviously we get feedback from families as well, and because their views are sought, even though this is an educational psychology and education setting consultation, obviously the families kind of get feedback and they see the strategies that have been planned, and they can be part of the review process as well. And education staff have reported that they really feel empowered as part of the AANT process, and it really helps them to sort of, you know, plan together and then maybe feel more confident then when going out and trying different strategies in the classrooms or in the school. So the next couple of slides, there's a video. If you want to watch that, there's feedback from education settings, and then there's 2 slides with quotes, and I'll let you read those through and then I'll pick up explaining again after about 3 slides. So this slide shows a range of feedback from staff in schools, from families. It's just useful to see sort of what people have said really about that AANT consultation process. Because we use the AANT in other local authorities as well, we collated information from what other psychologists thought. I'll let you read these through for yourself, but I'm noticing their sleep was a surprise for one of the other psychologists, and actually for us in Suffolk it was such a reoccurring theme in the consultations. We did invest more time to develop materials and develop training sessions for our team, but also broader across Suffolk. And actually it's interesting to see that that psychologist now asks about sleep in every consultation. So we've also undertaken doctorate level research in the AANT over the last, it was about 2 or 3 years ago now, and I'm just going to share some early indicator sort of data from that research. When looking at AANT outcomes using an empirical study, basically what I ran through was t-tests, and I was looking at the difference between the experiences of face-to-face and telephone consultation, because this was pre-COVID, so we were using telephone then. And on looking at educational psychology advice and recommendations, how effective was the AANT consultation process in supporting children and young people in education settings, and an overall experience of the AANT process. All of the t-tests, either independent samples or dependent samples, depending on which questions I was looking at. But basically there was not a significant difference between the experiences of education setting staff, whether they'd experienced face-to-face consultation or telephone consultation. And again, this is just a quote to show one person's views was, yeah, the AANTs that they'd experienced all had the same impact, and this was again comparison between face-to-face or telephone at the time. So they really didn't think that the benefits for the young person are changed by which type of consultation they'd had, that they'd experienced. So it's interesting, because this research was gathered before COVID, there was not a lot of evidence sort of in the UK around the use of teleconsultation, so telephone or video consultation, in the profession. However, there was emerging evidence coming from the United States, and a lot of the research was looking at acceptability of using this method in school psychology practice and whether it was effective. And the doctorate study, as well as the kind of survey, regular kind of local authority EP service data, has extended that emerging evidence base. So we know that people find it acceptable, and we know that the consultations are found to be effective. We also know from feedback, again part of the doctorate study but ongoing evaluation as well, we know that people like to see the EP in person. However, overwhelmingly our data shows that the outcomes for children and young people are similarly effective in terms of whether the consultation has been delivered face-to-face or via the telephone. So that's quite really useful information in terms of sort of where you're targeting your educational psychology resource. All staff found the AANT consultations useful in the doctorate study that we analysed, and indeed in AANT consultations generally. And we did notice that actually people's confidence before telephone consultation was a bit lower. However, after the telephone consultation, the progress in terms of how much confidence how their confidence grew was significant after they experienced one consultation with an EP. So yeah, people felt a little bit more, is this going to work, if it was going to be a telephone consultation pre-COVID, than they did when they were going to experience a face-to-face consultation. And basically, what we've done is we've taken feedback from education setting staff and we rebuilt that, we used that information to build the new AANT platform. So we're, as I say, from showing you the history slide, we're on version 3 now. That's the current version, and we're always using feedback basically to make little improvements. When we took a systemic look at how the AANT in Suffolk was helping us change and improve services, we kind of focused on these areas in our analysis. So we really felt that in terms of sort of inclusive growth, we were looking at educational attainment. So we were looking at the contribution of the AANT in terms of providing educational psychology advice and guidance and supporting inclusive strategies for children with special educational needs, and how it really impacted on their inclusion and progress generally. When we looked at healthcare and wellbeing, there was really an area around the appropriate support being identified earlier. And that could be, again, the example of identifying health needs such as sleep and the link to wellbeing and educational attainment there. It was definitely important for us to look at the efficient and effective allocation of educational psychology service in our sort of public sector offer, and a real clear link with the sort of green agenda in terms of reducing the need to travel to different schools, really embracing technology. So the online form and the tele-consultation process is using and embracing new technology, and overall the impact for children in terms of the information that we were gathering was around, we had a focus around basically supporting mainstream placements and reducing impact on statutory services. However, over time we have noticed that specialist provisions and special schools are requesting an AANT consultation, and it could be then the conversation really is around supporting their inclusion, their placement, and also sometimes being requested when a young person's needs have changed slightly since their original statutory assessment, and the use of sort of a focused consultation using that AANT framework has been really useful as well there. So sort of broad impact areas. So we're definitely using AANT data at an individual child level, as well as looking at trends. So you can analyse trends in any way which you want to, really, with the data in terms of year group or certain topics that, like I said, I've mentioned sleep a couple of times, and that has been very useful for us because we've identified training needs. It influences how we allocate our resource, so we now do want to allocate more educational psychology consultations early. So we've been able to sort of set up projects really, or focus areas on, for example, early years, early intervention ANTs, and target more of our resource there, because we've noticed that that's a really effective use of that public sector resource in the psychology service. So our work with the AANT is still ongoing. We're still innovating the process. We use feedback in order to sort of design improvements, and a really fantastic thing for us is working with other local authorities, educational psychology service, so that we kind of take their feedback as well and incorporate it into next steps. So in Suffolk, as I've mentioned, the early years ANT, so that's only come in sort of the end of version 2, version 3 of the ANT. So we're continuing to move those consultations into our core offer, so that's our free at the point of delivery offer in Suffolk, and starting earlier than we were originally when the ANT was originally developed. We do seek feedback, so we sort of look to see what people are saying in terms of how we evolve the AANT, and we are working with other local authority services and other services within our own authority to look and see sort of improvements. So in order to maximise the benefit of working in this way, we will be developing the AANT online website, and we're looking at creating a sort of summary overview of that analysis. At the moment it's a sort of written qualitative report, and we want to just provide a qualitative summary on a front page. So that's something that we're going to look at next. As psychologists, we're particularly excited about working with other educational psychologists in other local authorities. We're learning from each other. It's really interesting to see where the AANT consultations fit in different EP services, just depending on how they're commissioned, and we're learning from each other. We hope to develop resources together and place them on AANT Online, and we really want to build and share this evidence base and this sort of teleconsultation offer by basically learning together. Obviously we're taking part in doctorate research, so I've mentioned that already. And this helps us really build a rigorous, psychologically informed evidence base for the AANT. And finally, here are my contact details. You're most welcome to contact me there. Please do have a look at our webpage. We're updating it all of the time with more information and just kind of like, well, basically adding to it. And then if you want to follow us on Twitter as well, we often post, like when there are updates, we signpost them to you, or any bits of research or sort of summaries of things that we've learned, we post on our Twitter as well. And thank you for listening.